Hello and welcome. We're on the Flip video run today. I've got with me Craig Taylor. Craig, why have we issued these Flip cameras out to people on site?
What we're hoping to do, Neil, is we're hoping to give business areas, departments the ability to record those small snippets of information, those small tasks, those small jobs, and be able to put them into an online area so that other people within their team, their department, their business area, or the whole site can then go to those video resources and access them. They say that a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, I'm hoping that a talking, moving picture can paint 2,000 words.
Okay, I mean, that sounds good. So where did this idea come from? It sounds like a great idea, something that I'd come up with, but I know I didn't on this case.
And I'd like to say that I came up with it, but on this case I didn't. I went to the Learning Technologies Conference back in January 2010, and I saw the head of learning and development from British Telecom, a guy called Peter Butler, speak with a great amount of passion and enthusiasm about a project that he's headed up called Dare to Share. And essentially what they've done is they've given the whole of British Telecom throughout the world the ability to record information on cameras such as these, or even smaller cameras, and they've then created their own internal YouTube. So it's not just a case of they've created video content and that's been the end of it. They've then got a platform that sits behind their firewall for security purposes. They're able to put that video content onto there and actually create their own internal YouTube. Okay. And that's where the idea came from.
Oh, I mean, it's a great idea, and I think you've showed me some of the footage that they've shot on with BT. But security, that's a real issue. You know, what are the security implications for your UK by using these Flip cameras?
You're absolutely right, and that was the first sort of thought in my mind. The first hurdle would be obviously getting permission to enable these sorts of cameras to be used. The first thing that I did was actually find out whether there was the level of interest within the site to go forward with this project. So I sat down key people, key stakeholders from different business areas, pitched the idea to them, showed them the camera, showed them the footage of Dare to Share, BT's effort on YouTube, and then actually asked for their buy-in. And every single department that I approached was very, very keen to progress this. With that support behind me, I then sought encouragement from security and IT security, spoke to them, and yes, there have been certain parameters that we have to operate in. We can't use these perhaps as freely as we might be able to do on our home PCs or other organisations might be able to do. Sure. But to be perfectly honest, the parameters that we're operating under, they're common sense, and there's nothing actually that's really, really going to restrict what we can do with these cameras. It just requires a huge dollop, as most things do, of common sense applying to it. And we've had a lot of support from security and IT security as well. Okay,
well that's really encouraging from that side. So let's take a situation where a process worker's got a project that he's got to do, whether it's change a pump or whatever it is. Is this where these cameras come into play? They can actually film that process, and then other people across the business can use that from a learning point of view. Is that what we're saying?
It's absolutely that. It's the filming, the small fiddly task, the changing a pump, the changing a fuse, changing a wheel on a trailer, those sorts of hands-on tasks. But it could also be used very easily by the filmer actually turning the camera around, filming themselves, talking to camera, just as we're doing now, but on a much quicker process, and then putting that onto the U drive and onto the intranet for other people to see. So it's primarily aimed at skills and physical skills, but it can also be a talking head, somebody pitching an idea, somebody giving some feedback.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned with BT that they've put it on a YouTube type arrangement within their firewalls. Now, we're not ready for that yet. We're still looking at buying servers and trying to get that sort of facility in. And as we know, things take a little bit of time. How are people going to be able to view these films and in the medium term, you know, while we're waiting?
What we've done as part of the project, when I went out and gave the coaching to the people around the business on these cameras, and there are only certain people in certain business areas can actually use them, I've created for them a shared drive on the U drive. So all of their videos that they create, all the footage can be put into that U drive. What I've then advised them is that if they are an intranet author, then it'll be a very, very simple process for them to drag that video from the U drive and link to it from one of their intranet pages. They can do that themselves. Okay. Or if they're not an intranet author themselves, they just need to speak to their department's intranet author. It's a very quick process. They'll just link from the intranet to the U drive, and people will be able to view the movies at the click of a button from the U drive.
Okay, so these cameras, these Flip cameras, what do they save the films on? Is there any other process to do other than loading it on the computer?
Yeah, there is. There's a piece of very, very simple software that comes with the camera called FlipShare. Part of the IT security constraints was that these cameras could only be used on certain PCs around site, and those PCs needed to be identified. We've done that by making sure that the software only sits on certain PCs. Okay. So the workflow essentially is the owner of these cameras goes out, records the footage,
Yeah.
goes back to that designated PC, plugs the camera in, software will automatically open up. They can do some very simple editing, nothing like the sort of level that will be involved with the footage that we're recording now.
Yeah.
They'll be able to produce a very, very short, sharp piece of footage. That will then export into the U drive, and the next step is adding a link from the intranet. So a very swift process from start to finish.
Okay, I mean, this sounds really slick. For me, it's you know, a new way for Urenco. It's a new way forward. So what does the future hold? You know, we're taking this small step. What does the future hold for us?
I think the short term is just for people in these business areas to start using these cameras, start recording some content and getting it on the internet and seeing how it takes off, seeing what the feedback is like for that. I think that the mid to long term prospects of being able to do that are quite limiting because our intranet is not designed to allow these sorts of videos to be embedded as such. And what I'd like to see in the long term is a much greater increase and much greater interest from around the business in using these cameras.
Yeah.
And I think that will be fairly quick in coming once people see the benefits of it. But what we really need a platform to enable us to create our own internal YouTube. Because what Peter Butler actually said in his film footage was, this accounts for a certain amount of learning, the footage that's on these cameras.
Yeah.
But the real learning occurs in the conversation that takes place around the content.
Right.
So at the moment, all our learners can do, all our employees can do, is actually sit and watch a video, and
Sure.
that's the end of it.
Yeah.
What we'd really like them to be able to do is to watch the video and then ask a question about it.
Yeah.
Engage in a conversation,
Yeah.
say, really like the footage that you recorded, Neil, but have you ever considered X, Y, and Z?
Gotcha.
You can then come back and say, I have considered that, Craig, but
Yeah.
A, B, C. That conversation that's taking place between us is actually visible to everybody, so everybody's picking up on this learning. An internal YouTube would allow us to rate content, so I could give your piece of footage 5 stars, which means that people would go to that piece of footage because it's quality. You might give my piece of footage 1 star, and
Depends on the day, really.
and it never gets a visit. So that's the sort of interaction and that's the sort of conversation that we'd like to see to be able to be built around this footage in the long term.
I mean, that seems key to me. You've got to have that interaction. You've got to have that engagement, that two-way engagement for this to work. And I know we've got challenges with our communications IT platforms at the moment. And maybe if we get enough people using this facility, that creates enough internal pressure for us to get into a position where we can get the correct communication platforms in to really do a proper YouTube job on it. So I look forward to that. So thank you very much for joining me today, Craig, and nice update. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neil.